today we are going to learn what are the different data types available in C language. Basically, you can see on the screen there are two types of data types available: fundamental data types and derived data types. What are fundamental data types? They include the data types at the lowest level, that is, those which are used for actual data representations into the memory. Okay, all other data types which are there, all the other data types are created from the fundamental data types. For example, you can see the second point, derived data types are created from the fundamental data types. Okay. The fundamental data types includes the data types at the lowest level: char, int, float. These are the fundamental data types. What is a char data type? It is for storing one character. Let's say I want to store the character A. So we can use the fundamental data type char. Int data type represents integer numbers. If you want to store integer numbers, we can use the data type int. Float data type is for the numbers with decimals such as amounts, quotients, salary. You want to store the percentage, anything with the decimal point, we can store it using the float data type. Moving to the next, the derived data types. Derived data types are based on the fundamental data types. That is, they are represented in the memory as a fundamental data type. Okay, derived data types are represented in the memory as a fundamental data type. Some of the derived data types with their storage requirements, you can see. Before to that, you can see on your screen there are arrays and structures. Okay, what are arrays and structures? So array is, let's say for example, I want to store 10 integer numbers. Okay, how can I store 10 integer numbers? I will require 10 memory locations of the fundamental data type integer. Okay, so instead of that, we can go for the concept of array, which we are going to learn later. We have a structures. Let's say I want to store the data of detail of a student. Student is having a roll number, student is having a name, he is having some address, he is having some contact number. So there are so many things with different type of data I want to group together because it is the detail of one student, right? So that we can store using the structures. We are going to see structures also as a separate topic. Okay. Apart from the arrays and structures, you have short int. There is a data type called as short int, which is for storing the small integer numbers of minimum size is -2 raised to 15 to +2 raised to 15. This is the size of storing the short integer. You have long integer, you have double float. There are different derived data types which are coming from the fundamental data types. Okay. Now, how to create this into a memory? Let's say for example, I want to write my C program in which I want to store a number 25. Okay. So what you are going to write? Okay. I will just write it in a notepad here. If you want to write that, you can write, you want to store a number 25, it is an integer number, so you need to write int and you need to give some name. Let's say I am giving the name as num is equal to 25. Int num is equal to 25 and you're going to put a semicolon. What does the semicolon represent? It is the end of the statement. When you write this int num is equal to 25, so int is the data type here Num is the variable name. What is this num? Num is the variable. What is a variable? It is the named memory location. That means inside the memory, some space is reserved for storing your number. That space is given a name called as num. Okay, there are some rules and regulation for naming a variable. For naming a variable, the rules are I'm just writing it on the screen, rules for naming a variable. Okay, what is the first rule? The first rule for naming a variable is it should not contain spaces, special characters. Okay, what are special characters? These special characters, like you may have star, ampersand, cap symbol, percentage, dollar. Okay, the symbols are not allowed, spaces are not allowed. Okay, only the alphanumeric, that is alphabets and number. Only one special character is allowed. Okay, or I can put it in the first point, it should not contain spaces, special characters, except underscore. Okay, this is the underscore. So you can create, for example, you can write int num underscore 1 is equal to 25. Are you getting my point? You can write num underscore 1. Okay, so underscore is allowed. Numbers are also allowed, but numbers should not be in the start. Let's say, for example, numbers are allowed followed by alphabet. Okay, so for example, you can have the variable num1, you can have the variable num2, like that. Okay, or you may have num1 data, num1 underscore data. This is also allowed. That means numbers can also be there in between. So we have declared, this is called as declaration of a variable. There are two things. When you declare a variable, there are two things which comes as, one is called as declaration and second is called as initialization. Okay, what is a declaration? Declaration means if you write int num semicolon, you are not assigning anything, you are just reserving one memory. That is called as declaration. And later on, if you write num is equal to 25. If you have declared your variable above, you don't need not to write your data type again. You will just say num is equal to 25. This is called as initialization. You can write declaration and initialization together also. Okay, so int num is equal to 25. In that statement, declaration and initialization is together. Okay, here you can see we are going to there is a question which we will solve. Num to store integers. Num to store integers. So that is the one which we have seen. Okay, then char to store a character and assigns the character z to it. How can you do that? Char to store character and assign the number z to it. I am doing a practice 1.1. You want to declare a character variable. So the data type we are saying is char. What variable name they have said in the side? CHR. Okay. So char chr is equal to, we want to put the character, we want to store the character z inside the chr variable. Moving to the third, num to store a number and assigns the value 8.93 to it. Okay, 8.932. Now when I say 8.932, that means it is a floating point number. We cannot write int for it. So we will write float f, or you can, okay, they are saying num, so we should write float num is equal to, we want to have the value 8.93 semicolon. Okay, moving to the next, ij to store the integer and assigns the value 0 to j. You read the question carefully. I comma j to store the integers and assigns the value 0 to j. We are not assigning anything to I. Okay, so we will say write int I comma, see, when you want to declare more than one variable together, we can put a comma and directly we can write it on a single line. This can also be written like this, int I semicolon. Next line you will write, int j is equal to 0. This is same as the above one. Okay, this both the same. You can, when you have two variables of the same data type, we can declare it on the same line by putting comma, or we can reutilize it separately. So you can see these answers.